Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Penn Alumni Water Forum. I'm Joanne Spigonardo, Senior Advisor at the Water Center at Penn. Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us. Today's topic of discussion is about the cleaning product supply chain and water resilience. The conversation will focus on how the cleaning product supply chain is addressing water conservation and water equity. Our sincere thanks to our speakers. We are featuring moderator Nathan Sell, Senior Director of Sustainability at American Cleaning Institute, and panelists Mark Hughes, Senior Manager of Global Environmental Operations at Church and Dwight, and Martin Wolf, Director of Sustainability and Authenticity at Seventh Generation. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Nathan Sell. Nathan is the Senior Director of Sustainability at the American Cleaning Institute. In this role, he is responsible for leading, developing, and executing all facets of ACI's sustainability program. Nathan manages and directs internal, member-focused, and public initiatives for sustainability regarding cleaning products. He joined ACI in 2020, initially serving as Director of Regulatory Science. Prior to joining ACI, Nathan held positions at the Environmental Protection Agency, Chemical Review Manager in the Office of Pesticide Programs, and an ORISE Research Fellow in the Office of Water. Nathan has also held roles on the editorial board of the University of Pennsylvania's WH2O Journal and the Initiative for Global Environmental Leadership, IGEL, at the Wharton School. At that time, Nathan and I worked together. Nathan graduated from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut with a BS in biology and minor in environmental science, and holds a master's degree in environmental studies with a concentration in environmental sustainability from the University of Pennsylvania. Nathan will formally introduce our speakers. It's a pleasure to work with you again, Nathan, and thank you for being our moderator. So Nathan, take it away.
Thank you, Joanne, for the nice introduction. And yeah, I can't believe that we used to work together 10 years ago at IGEL, and it's nice to be back at Penn again. So let me just pull up my slides. Okay. Great. So thanks for the introduction again. And I just wanted to give a quick introduction to the American Cleaning Institute and some background for how we work with our members like Seventh Generation and Church and Dwight. Okay, so the American Cleaning Institute is a trade association that works with the cleaning product supply chain. We were founded in 1926, and we're located in Washington, D.C. We have about 100, actually, we have a little over 170 members at the moment. And we work with, our members include manufacturers of household, commercial, healthcare, industrial, and institutional cleaning products, as well as chemical producers, such as those that make surfactants, enzymes, and fragrances. Also the finished packaging suppliers that provide packaging for cleaning products, and also chemical distributors. And so this is just a snapshot of some of our members. So I'm sure some familiar logos in there, of course, especially Church and Dwight and Seventh Generation. And the way that we function as a trade association is to serve the growth and innovation of the U.S. cleaning products supply chain by advancing the health and quality of life of people and protecting our planet. ACI achieves this through a continuous commitment to sound science and being a credible voice for the cleaning products industry. We do that with 4 key objectives in our strategic plan. So the first is business, science, sustainability, and communications. So we focus a lot of our science on safety and efficacy of cleaning products, our communications around safety, how to read labels, how to use products safely, and then our sustainability initiatives, I'll get into a little bit more, but you'll get to see kind of how we work with members. So our goal with our sustainability initiatives are to drive and amplify industry action around sustainability. So Our goals are focused around these four key areas that you see on the right. So we are Uniting for a Cleaner World framework is to contribute positively, increase transparency, reduce emissions, and value nature. So our various initiatives are based in these four key areas. And this is just a snapshot of some of our larger initiatives that we work with member companies on as well. So the first is our 1.5 degree centigrade climate challenge. So this is a challenge that is asking our members to commit to be net zero by 2050 with meaningful action by 2030 in line with the Paris Agreement. Currently have 20 members signed on to this. I think we started 2 years ago with 10, so it's grown quite a bit. But we do keep track of our members. We know that there's something more like 50 members out of our entire membership have committed to net zero by 2050. So working to expand that and highlight the good work that's happening there. In line with that climate initiative, we also have our Cold Water Saves initiative. So this is a website and also social media content focused on getting consumers to launder on cold water. The reason that this is such a big initiative for us is that for the laundry space, in-home washing is really the largest producer of carbon emissions, especially for scope 3 for our products. And it outweighs almost all of the other initiative or outweighs all of the other emissions from laundry, the life cycle of laundry detergents. So we know that about 90% of the energy that goes to washing a load of laundry goes to heating the water. So if we can wash more loads on cold, we can really save a huge amount of carbon emissions. And especially with today's technologies in terms of the laundry machines and the detergents themselves, you get just as clean on cold. So there's not any good reason to wash on warm or hot unless there's really a really hard stain to get out or something like that. We also have our circular packaging ambition. So we're working with members to get packaging for cleaning products to be more circular, so recyclable and made of recycled materials and renewable and also compostable. Our Sustainable Feedstocks initiative is a newer initiative focused at the raw materials that are going into cleaning products. So working with members to help identify more sustainable options, moving from petroleum to plant-based, moving to certified products like RSPO palm oil or certified sugar, things like that. And then finally, last but not least, but a newer initiative for us as well is our environmental justice work. So what we're doing here primarily is working with our members so that they can better understand what environmental justice is, how they impact environmental justice and both in the regulatory landscape and in their surrounding communities, and how they can take action to address environmental justice concerns. So that's in a nutshell what we are working on at ACI. And so I have two of our member companies here today who help us with all of these initiatives. They have representatives that work with us in our sustainability space, as well as throughout our other initiatives at the American Cleaning Institute. So with that, let me pull this slide down. Okay. So our first speaker today, before I continue, sorry, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that you can submit questions to us throughout the course of the webinar. Please use the question and answer function in Zoom, and we'll make sure to address those questions at the end. Feel free to address them to a single speaker or to us all. And our first speaker is Martin Wolf. Martin is responsible for creating frameworks for the design of sustainable products at Seventh Generation Inc., a manufacturer and distributor of ecological, household, and commercial or personal care products. He's also responsible for creating frameworks for more sustainable systems of commerce and for working with other businesses, industry associations, legislators, and regulators, and implementing those frameworks. Mr. Wolf brings over 40 years of experience in industrial and environmental chemistry to his work, starting with environmental fate and metabolism studies for agricultural chemicals, followed by studies of the occurrence of hazardous chemicals in the environment, conducting life cycle studies of product systems, and designing more sustainable household cleaning products. In addition to his work for Seventh Generation, Mr. Wolf served in leadership roles on several ACI committees, Mr. Wolf holds a variety of accolades for a career dedicated to sustainability. I truly encourage you to review his full biography on the webinar website. Mr. Wolf holds a MA in chemistry from Yeshiva University in New York and a BS in chemistry from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. With that, I'll turn it over to Martin. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Nathan, for that introduction. One moment while I get my screen share going. There we go. And good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on what in New England is an extremely cold morning. My intent today is to speak to you a bit about some of the issues facing humankind generally in terms of our access to water, and then some of the things that seventh generation is doing to address those big issues. I'm going to begin with a brief introduction to seventh generation. The name seventh generation comes from the Haudenosaunee Nation, which is a confederation of 6 Native American nations. The 6 nations formed this confederation in the 16th century, and they have a great law which rules their relationships. And within the great law is a single law that states in our every deliberation, we must consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. A very strong call to action to think about the future, not just the next 90 days. And our company has a mission, which is to transform the world into a healthy, sustainable, and equitable place for the next 7 generations. So in every product that we offer and design, we think about how we're going to impact broadly human health, our environment, and equity for all people whom we serve. We make cleaning products such as laundry detergents, dish detergents, etc., some of which are shown here. And we are a certified B Corporation, which means that in addition to a responsibility to our shareholders, we have responsibilities to other stakeholders, including our employees, the communities in which we operate, and the environment. So that's a little bit about seventh generation. Now I want to talk a bit about everyone's water. Just last week in the New York Times, there was this headline that drought touches a quarter of humanity. Imagine that 2 billion people are suffering from drought, and the thought of scarcer availability of water is on many of our minds, especially those people who are, for example, in this country, in the Southwest, where water shortages frequently occur. But over Christmas, just a few weeks before, there was this headline: at least 51 dead in the Philippines after holiday flooding. And I know we've all read about the flooding in Asia, in parts of this country, and in South America. And we realize that flooding is also a widespread, indeed global problem. So which is it? Is there a scarcity of water, or is there a surfeit of water? And the answer is the amount of water on this planet has been essentially constant for the past 4.5 billion years. And in fact, the water on this planet was formed even before the planet was formed, roughly 7 to 11 billion years ago. That water has served generations of life on Earth. It is 60% of each of our bodies. And it goes to show that even we are made out of recycled materials. The issue that we are facing is the distribution of that water, which has been changing, particularly in the past several decades, as our climate has changed. So as our climate changes, as the planet warms, the pump that takes water from the tropics and deposits it primarily toward the poles, has itself been changing. So changes in the carbon cycle have consequences in the water cycle. And we are seeing those consequences playing out in communities which for decades, if not centuries, have located themselves near sources of water, since it is so vital to life. But with the changes in that distribution, now find themselves either in water scarcer regions or in water rich to the point of harm regions. So what can we do to start to, as a company, as seventh generation, to start to address this issue of climate change, which is impacting the access to our water? Well, there are two things. First, we're looking at our own carbon footprint. As Nathan said, roughly 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with products made by seventh generation are from consumer use of our products. But if we ignore that 90% for a moment, I'll get to it later, and look at the other 10%, what we see is that roughly 60% of that remaining 10%, or 6% overall, comes from the ingredients that we purchase for our products. And when we look specifically at seventh generation, we see two classes of ingredients that are particularly impactful. One is agriculturally derived products, and particularly palm kernel oil from the palm plant in tropical areas. And the other is from a type of chemical called citrates, which can be produced in high energy or high greenhouse gas emitting economies, such as those of China. And what we are doing is working to make sure that any palm kernel oil derived ingredients we use come from plantations where there has not been deforestation, where there is not harm to peat containing soils, which helps reduce the greenhouse gas impacts of those palm derived materials. And just this year, we started focusing on buying citrates from low carbon emitting economies, such as those in Europe and certain parts of the United States. And we hope to reduce those emissions by nearly half over the coming years with these actions. But what about the bigger piece, that 90%? Well, we feel what must be done is provide non-greenhouse gas emitting energy and electricity to all consumers so that when they use our products, if they choose to heat the water, they do so without emitting greenhouse gases. And so we are advocating for reductions in greenhouse gases. In 2021, when there was a large climate march in New York, seventh generation gave everyone in the company the opportunity to go down to New York. They closed the company and provided buses. We worked with the Sierra Club on a program called Ready 100, in which we worked to convince 100 municipalities to commit to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And in fact, we got 114 municipalities to agree. So it is through this advocacy, working with legislators here, for example, in Vermont on a clean energy action plan, with legislators in other states and with associations like the American Cleaning Institute, that we hope to see a fundamental change in the way energy is distributed to consumers throughout the world, or particularly throughout the United States. But the distribution of water shifting because of climate change is not the only issue we face. The image on your right shows the Earth. We know about 75% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, but only about 2.5% of that water is fresh water that is available to us for agriculture, drinking, and other uses. And of that 2.5%, roughly 30% is actually available to us in the form of surface and groundwater. The rest is frozen in glaciers, etc. So what can we do to make sure that water is available to us? Well, for one thing, we have to make sure we're not using more water than is actually available. What we are seeing globally is a depletion of aquifers by over-withdrawal from, for example, the Ogallala aquifer in the central United States and other aquifers around the world. There's also an issue of contamination. We have not been very careful about keeping our water supplies pure. I like to point out to people that live here in Burlington, Vermont, that we get our drinking water from Lake Champlain, but all of our discharges of water from our drains go back to Lake Champlain. So anything we put down our drains, we ultimately are going to see impacting us. And that's true in other regions of the world. Along the Mississippi River, cities like St. Louis are taking their water from the mighty Mississippi and then discharging it back. The United Nations Environmental Program has identified agriculture, mining, hazardous waste sites, and spills as leading issues of freshwater contamination, but they've also identified pharmaceuticals and consumer products going down the drain and being discharged into our surface waters and aquifers as contributing to this problem. So this is just a statement from the United Nations Environmental Program. What seventh generation does is makes sure that any ingredient in our products is biodegradable, so it will not persist in the environment. And if it's determined to be at some point toxic, we know that it will ultimately biodegrade and disappear. By making sure all the ingredients in our products are biodegradable, we avoid issues of contamination as have been observed with PCBs or PFAS, per and polyalkyl fluorinated substances, which persist in the environment for decades or centuries and are impossible to remove once they are released into the environment. We have standards, that guide our product development. And as I said, they include a requirement for biodegradability, a requirement that they not be on any chronic substances list maintained by the state of California. And we disclose all of the ingredients we use on our packaging because consumers should know what's in the products they buy and have a right to choose with an informed decision. So I look forward to your questions later today. And I thank you again, Nathan, for that introduction. And thank you, UPenn Water Forum, for having us to this presentation.
All right, thank you, Martin. I just wanted to ask how, Martin, how do you best engage with other cleaning product companies and the manufacturing space on topics like water stewardship at seventh generation?
So the answer is through associations like ACI. The forums that ACI creates allow us to interact with other cleaning product companies without concerns about antitrust, and with our suppliers, not only to discuss the materials we're purchasing and pricing, which we do obviously individually, but in a more global scale, so that we can all work together on addressing issues like climate change and water scarcity.
And I would just mention one thing I definitely notice about you, Martin, is that you're very engaged on like this legislative side as well, with states and on the federal level. How do you see that playing into companies such as Seventh Generation's policies?
Well, as you said in the introduction, one of the things that I do is try to create more sustainable systems of commerce. Seventh Generation and other companies can have great intentions, but if the frameworks of commerce are adverse to a cleaner environment, then we will not succeed in creating a clean and sustainable environment. So we see both proposing and advocating for legislative action as being essential to our sustainability as well as the sustainability of our broader environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Martin, and we'll see you in a few minutes. All right, it's also my pleasure to introduce Mark Hughes from Church and Dwight. Mr. Hughes has more than 30 years of experience in environmental management. His early career was involved with environmental due diligence, assessment, investigation, and environmental regulatory compliance in the consulting industry. And for the past 17 plus years, Mr. Hughes has been part of the Church and Dwight Environmental and Safety Operations Department with primary focus on operational environmental management and compliance. He's had increasing responsibilities for the company's sustainability efforts, working with other departments and company management to assess and develop their current 6-pillar ESG platform reflected in the company ESG report. He is responsible for operational sustainability efforts, including establishing operational sustainability goals, working with manufacturing sites to identify and implement sustainability projects, and tracking and reporting company sustainability performance. In 2022, he assumed full-time responsibility for managing Church and Dwight's supply chain sustainability efforts. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. In Martin's discussion, he talked pretty high level about global issues. As my title reflects, I am in the operations department. So what I do, I try and get this started. There we go. I look at how do we, as we operate the company, how do we work towards achieving those goals? How do we work towards doing our share to, in this specific case, focus on water and water risk? So with all that as background, let me just give you a little quick update to Church and Dwight. We were founded in 1846. We make a variety of personal care products. You may not recognize Church and Dwight, but I'm sure you'll recognize most of the brands that we have listed here. Arm & Hammer is our major brand, I guess you could say it is our biggest recognized brand. I'm sure most of you have a box of Arm & Hammer baking soda somewhere in your house. But we also have a number of other personal care and cleaning products under these brands. Most recently, TheraBreath mouthwashes and Hero Acne products were acquired over the last couple of years and are now part of our portfolio. Things that align more with the ACI side of the business, obviously Arm & Hammer with laundry detergent and baking soda and cleaning, OxyClean, again with detergent and stain removers. And then we also have extra laundry detergent, as well as Kaboom scrub-free and clean shower cleaners. Just a note that those brands are actually being rolled up into the OxyClean brand. So if you use those products and gee, I can't find them, look for similar products under the OxyClean line. But because we have those types of products within our portfolio, we do interact with ACI on a fairly regular basis. Our water management from an operations standpoint comes back to our policy. And this policy was set so that there was a common understanding of what we were committing to and what was important to our company. Roughly summarized here, it's that we understand that we need to assess water, that access to water and proper sanitation is essential to human health and quality of life, that water is a necessary resource for the sustainable future of both our company, but also the communities where we operate and the planet as a whole, and that we understand that the risks that we both incur for our company and potentially impact on others need to be understood. so that we need to responsibly manage our water as a shared community resource, conserve water resources where we can, and especially do that where there is scarcity or other water stresses. Next on our policy is that we believe that our management has to ensure that there's an adequate supply of both quantity and quality of fresh water for our business as well as the communities where we operate. And to do that and ensure that, we need to routinely evaluate opportunities to reduce our water and products and to reduce the amount of water or the efficiency of use of water in our processes and to establish and meet goals. What that translates to from an operational approach is that we look at our water use in 3 buckets. We look at water risk and stress. We look at water in product and product use. And then we look at water use in manufacturing. When we look at water risk, we look at the WRI, or World Resources Institute, water risk ranking for the locations where we operate our manufacturing sites. And when we look at that, we look at understanding that most of our sites, 60% roughly, are in areas of low water risk in general. If you're not familiar with WRI, it ranks water risk in a whole bunch of different categories: quality, quantity, regulatory, so forth and so on. Probably the most common risk that we encounter is access to high quality water. And that's because we are in areas that are fairly populated. And therefore, there are demands and potential risk for contamination of our water sources. Only 5% of our sites are in medium to high risk locations. We don't have any currently in high or high level risk sites. We had one, but some recent rains and things like that have knocked that back into medium to high in the last cycle. We look at this every year and re-rank all of our sites, and we look at it in terms of the percentage of extraction of water from these risk areas. Next, we look at where does our water come from? If you look at the chart in the middle, you'll see that 80% of our water comes from city water or public purveyors. 20% roughly comes from well water and very little bit from some other sources, but most of our water is coming from public supply. So what does that mean? That means that we then need to make sure we understand what situations our water suppliers and our wastewater treatment facilities are working in. So we regularly communicate with them. We have open conversations with them. We have formal meetings and informal conversations, primarily to look at understanding what is their available capacity. Do they have any planned capacity expansions or changes? What is going to happen? What are they anticipating happening to their system? Is there going to be a new residential development coming in? Is there a new industrial facility coming in? Or is one closing down that's going to change the demands and impact on their water? We also talk to them about what our expected water demands are going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years, and then what our wastewater needs and characteristics look like. And we keep that conversation open, make sure that we understand what's affecting them and how it could affect us, and they understand what our working scenarios are and how it could affect them. And then we find common ground where we can help and support each other. With respect to water and product, that's really a cooperative agreement between brands and research and development. Couple of quotes here from our sustainability report last year. Essentially, the process does engage in reviewing sustainability criteria for our product innovations. We're looking at what opportunities do we have to minimize water or energy requirements, both in the manufacture and use of our products. And then as we refine those, we share them and work with other third parties where we may be working with our other innovation partners to make sure that that information and that philosophy is imparted in their exploration of potential product innovations. And some things that have come out of that in the last few years relative to our laundry products is 2023, we just completed phase 2 of our liquid laundry detergent concentration. You may see this on the shelf at the store. It's smaller bottles, it's more loads per bottle. In addition to the reduction in water required to make it, there's a greenhouse gas benefit in terms of fewer batches to make as many loads, fewer truckloads to get as much product and laundry loads out onto the retail shelf, and so forth. And all of our laundry detergents are high efficiency and work in cold water. So, that is also part of the communication that our brands and marketing tries to impart with respect to our products. A couple other things you might not have seen on the shelf, but are available online. Super concentration. That's taking this concentration effort all the way to the end of the road, I guess, and having extremely concentrated liquid in small containers. And then also laundry detergent sheets, where again, it's just a sheet that you drop into your laundry to do the laundry, and there's no water used at all in the manufacture of the product. When we look at our use in manufacturing, we look at our net consumption, and that net consumption is our total water intake or withdrawal minus our total water discharges. You can see that we have decreased our water discharges since 2017, about 16% on total water intake, 26% on discharge, and 8% on our total net consumption. And that's the culmination of a variety of different water conservation projects at our manufacturing locations, as well as changes in water use to product. And just a quick breakdown on our wastewater discharge in 2022, about half of our wastewater discharge is processed, about a little less than a quarter is sanitary, and the rest is cooling or other water uses. And again, this is the kind of information when we're talking to those wastewater treatment facilities, making sure that they understand what kind of wastewater we're discharging, we're in compliance with the permits that we have, but that we're also working with them to ensure that they can treat and break down anything that we give them. For example, we have one site where the wastewater treatment facility was not comfortable taking our discharge. So we put it in tanks and we hauled it off to a larger facility that was able to handle it. Over time, maintaining conversation with the local POTW, we were able to work with them, and they expanded their treatment capabilities such that now they're willing to take our wastewater, albeit not directly discharged, but we bring it to them and put it in a tank, and then they can manage the discharge and treatment of it over time, so that water is going back into the same area where it was pulled out of. And we're working towards the ability to be able to discharge directly to them as we work with them and help them develop the capability necessary to handle our wastewater. Goals, we have an evergreen goal of 10% reduction of total water intake per product shipped in terms of millions of pounds shipped. We hit that goal in 2020. We didn't hit that goal in 2021 and 2022, and it looks like it's going to be about the same for 2023. That data is still coming in. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them being that I think the low fruit on water reduction projects has been picked already. So it's more challenging to find impactful projects that we can do in our manufacturing to reduce the amount of water that we use. However, since 2019, we've reduced our total water intake by 16%, and we've reduced our net consumption by 10% at the same time that the company has grown substantially. And when we talk about water use in manufacturing, these are the typical types of projects and things that we look at to affect our operational conservation of water. Processed water pretreatment, reverse osmosis is the most common practice that we use. I don't know if you're familiar with reverse osmosis or not, but it is essentially a filtering process. And every once in a while, you need to backwash that filter to remove what's the material that's been collected in it. So that backwash is just dumped. It's wastewater. And then when you start the system back up, the system continues to reject and just discharge water until the water quality gets up to the point where the set point is, and we can begin to use it. Well, all that water was just going to drain. So we put in systems in most of our sites where now we collect that water, we treat it, and we can recover about 80% of that and use it for other uses in the plant. So that it was, just one approach that we used. with respect to facility uses of water for mechanical water, steam, and sanitary. It's amazing how much water you can lose in steam if you're not maintaining your steam systems properly. So that has been a big emphasis for the company over the last several years, making sure that we're collecting steam condensate. And again, the water savings there have been fairly significant. Sanitary, just, low flow toilets and motion sensor sinks, right? They were hardly anywhere 10 years ago. Now they're everywhere. And that does have a long-term impact. Every little bit helps, literally. With respect to cleaning, reclaiming final rinse water has been a part of our processes for a very long time. So we look at refining that and doing a little better job at that. We're looking at other water sources and water uses where we can reclaim both our raw wastewater, but also other places where we're using water for once through uses. And we can then save that water and use it, put it to secondary uses. Clean in place systems with high efficiency spray heads, as opposed to letting someone just run hot water through the system until it was clean, right? Now we've got fixed amounts of water that we use, and that sort of rolls into the steaming and cleaning, finding different ways to clean that don't use as much water. Again, we used to just flush systems with hot water. Now it's a water rinse, it's a detergent rinse, and it's another water rinse, and the reduction in water from just running water to clean systems. Cleaning systems and reducing the number of times we need to do cleaning. Campaigning production. We have free and clear laundry detergent, right? No fragrances, no dyes. In order to run that product, we have to make sure that the processing equipment is completely cleaned. And that's a deep clean that we need to do every time we run that product, so that there is no residual dyes or fragrances or anything like that in the product. So when we campaign that, we do longer runs of that product. And then we do our regular products that have dyes and fragrances afterwards. And those we can do a simple clean because there's not as much impact if there's just a little residual of the other product in there. It's not noticeable. And it reduces the amount of water we need to clean between batches. And then lastly, for cooling, we used to have many once pass through cooling systems. We've eliminated those. We've put in cooling towers and closed loop systems at all of our locations now. Again, that's been a great save on water. And then those cooling towers also consume a fair amount of water because you're essentially evaporating the water off as part of your cooling process. So we've adjusted set points on those cooling towers so that the amount of water required for makeup is minimized. And these are just some of the ways that we run our facilities, the ways we do our cleaning, where we find opportunities where we can reduce water. So that was sort of Church and Dwight's approach from the operations side, and things that we do to try and reduce our water use. My contact information is here if anyone would like to discuss this further, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Mark. I've got a question for you, and just a reminder, anyone who has questions can submit into the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll make sure to answer them here in the next few minutes. But for Mark, what is like the biggest obstacle to reducing water in manufacturing for Church and Dwight?
Yeah, it's not a big surprise that it's cost. Water is still relatively cheap from the standpoint of all the goods and materials that we use. So it's difficult to just justify a water conservation project solely on the return on investment, which would be the normal assessment on how you're going to spend your capital to do your project. So it means we need to prioritize those type of projects. Also, sometimes it's the technical aspects. We could reduce that amount of water, but does it put our product quality at risk?
Yeah. Right, and I'll bring Martin back for this next one. So I know both companies are working on more concentrated products, of course, shipping smaller bottles and packages, reduces a lot of the carbon emissions associated with transport. I was wondering if you could both discuss a little bit some of the challenges with concentrating products, both in a technical way, as well as consumer adoption of new products. Is that an area that you see any issues with? And I can start with you, Mark.
I'm sorry, Mark and
Oh,
Martin sound alike. Was
yeah, it
that
sounded
me?
like I said Mark, but yeah.
Oh, you
If
did?
wanna talk.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting little unstable internet connection warnings, so sometimes
Okay.
it's a little broken up. Well, for us, there are a couple of things. One is, yes, the consumer behavior, convincing a consumer that they can use a quarter cup, not a half cup, and get the same result, is sometimes a challenge. And then from our standpoint, again, when we're talking about our wastewater generation, for example, if we're making a more concentrated product, then by default, the wastewater we generate is going to be a little more concentrated. So, making sure that we're not generating a waste stream that presents more challenges than it has to the downstream treatment works and that kind of a thing. So those are, we've also had some issues where not necessarily that, but where we've concentrated water to the point that we now are at risk of not being able to comply with our discharge permits because we've increased the loading on our wastewater for various reasons. So that's a balance we need to play in a plant specific basis as to whether or not we can take more water out of the process, if you will.
And Martin,
Similar to
yeah.
Church and Dwight, seventh generation does make an ultra concentrated product. It only requires about a third of an ounce, I believe about 10 milliliters to do a load of laundry. And there are several issues that we have. One is the possibility that consumers will use too much. It's hard to measure such small quantities. And so we've created a bottle which you can invert, and I'm sorry I don't have one to demonstrate, and squeeze, and only 10 milliliters of the product comes out. So that prevents overdosing by the consumer, which is one problem. The other issue is as you concentrate chemicals, their potential to be irritating or have other harmful effects increases. So you are limited to some extent either by the initial properties of the chemicals you use, and you want to use the least irritating or the least toxic materials you can, because in the final product, they're going to be at a higher concentration. You don't want people to accidentally get it on their skin and then end up with a redness or other harmful effects due to the concentration of the ingredients. So it's a formulation challenge, and I'm always in awe of seventh generation chemists who can meet those challenges. And the other is a consumer use challenge, making sure consumers don't overdose, use too much of the product.
Yep. Yeah, no, we find at ACI that there's so many new concentrated products that it's also identifying what consumers respond to or understand, how to use. Is it a sheet? Is it a pod? Is it a concentrated liquid? All that sort of stuff. And maybe in the next few years it'll be interesting to see what comes to the surface, so to speak, on these concentrated products. We do have a question from the audience. I think this might be more for Martin, but do you think, or does sourcing palm oil from sustainably run plantations, I'm guessing like RSPO certified and the like, do enough to prevent deforestation elsewhere because of global demand?
So the answer is it is an important step in reducing deforestation. I don't know the exact statistic of how much deforestation occurs due to palm plantation expansion, but you also have expansion due to soy plantation because of increased demand for soy products, and also grazing land, destruction of forests to allow for greater areas grazing of cattle. So right now, RSPO, Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil Certified Palm, represents, I believe, roughly 25% of the palm oil that is sold globally. Obviously, that needs to be increased, and there need to be increased initiatives to reduce deforestation in the other agricultural areas, such as soy and cattle raising. So, no, it's not enough, but it is a first and very important step.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree that, it's certainly not enough, but increasing demand for palm that is responsibly produced is sort of the first step in making sure that more palm is responsibly produced. I'm hard to believe that we're almost out of time already, but just a final question for you both. Just briefly, what do you expect next, especially out of the water programs for your respective companies? We'll start with Mark again.
Well, for us, it's really just a continuation of the journey, I think. Continuing to look at those low water demand products, both in manufacture and use. Is looking at new technologies to help us find, like I said, if that low fruit is gone, it's more challenging to find effective water reduction projects. And we're going to have to lean more heavily into available technologies, both to clean up and reclaim water that we're currently using, as well as in our changes in our manufacturing.
For seventh generation, the focus remains the more global issues. So one, reducing our own greenhouse gas footprint, but also engaging others to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint. We've started a project called the Fingerprint Project, where we are looking at how fossil fuel and fossil feedstock companies are financed. We're looking at the banks we work with to see if they have investments in fossil companies. We're looking at our own 401k and other plans to see if we can get so-called fossil-free investment funds made available to employees of our company. And then we're working with other companies. Again, we can't do this alone. We're a small company, but by working with other larger companies and eventually ACI, we hope to see if we can begin to defund much of the fossil industry, stop the investment in infrastructure, which would just perpetuate the use of fossil fuels, fossil feedstocks for decades to come. So I'd say that's the biggest new initiative that we have. And then, of course, the others I mentioned, looking at our ingredients and their greenhouse gas impacts, because by reducing those greenhouse gas impacts, we are also helping stabilize the distribution of water around the globe.
Well, thank you, Martin and Mark, and I'll turn it over to Joanne to close us out.
Thank you so very much, Martin, Mark, and Nathan. Your remarks were outstanding and help us to further understand water resilience and the cleaning products supply chain. Thank you also to our audience for taking the time to participate. A recording of the webinar will be available on our website in a few days and will be emailed to you. Stay tuned for our next webinar on March 22nd, World Water Day. You will be receiving an invitation. Once again, Happy New Year. We are truly grateful for your interest and your commitment to water and to sustainability. We're doing very, very, very important work, and we are grateful to you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Joanne. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.